On the morning show, we're talking with one of the key issues for farmers at the moment, and that is biosecurity. And Ricky Lambert has joined me, as has the Minister for Agriculture, David Littleproud. Hi there, David. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
And very interesting time for biosecurity, particularly when we talk about the risks to our agriculture. But we have the Victorian and New South Wales government. Their position on biosecurity compared to the Commonwealth, has that changed?
Well, it hasn't. Unfortunately, they haven't been transparent. You've got to understand biosecurity is a joint responsibility. While we protect the borders, anything that happens inside the domestic borders actually are the remit of the states. And so we all have a responsibility to play, and even if there's an incursion, we work together. Now, there was a review done of our biosecurity systems by Wendy Craik in 2018, and she made it very clear that both state and federal governments had to maintain their funding levels to a minimum of 2016-17 levels. So what we said is, well, let's be open and transparent about that so that we know what everyone's spending, but more importantly, the granularity of what we're spending on. So it's a coordinated approach. So we're working together. We're trying to put together what we're calling a national biosecurity strategy. So I wrote to the states and said, look, it's important you tell me exactly how much you're spending and the programs you're spending on. You're not hiding it in business as usual things or little programs that actually don't go to what biosecurity measures should be. So unfortunately, those states, despite screaming at me about 6 months ago before the last Ministerial Council meeting, asking me to put biosecurity on our meeting's agenda, which I asked the Prime Minister to do, and which we have, I then asked them to provide me with their detailed costings and programs so that we can work across in a coordinated approach. And unfortunately, the states have all ducked for cover, and they've given percentages at best in some cases, not detailed programs, and in some cases have actually reduced their biosecurity spending. And this is concerning because what we need to do is have everyone working together, understanding what we're spending money on, because if there's an incursion, we really have to rely on one another to make sure we can eradicate, otherwise it becomes a pest that we have to manage.
Minister, I've seen comments from you from about Victoria and New South Wales. What's the South Australian position? You've mentioned all states have been lacking in transparency.
Some states are better than others. In fact, South Australia are providing us with those numbers as we speak, and they've been quite cooperative in terms of it. Western Australia and Queensland haven't, nor has Tasmania. And this is the thing is that we've said, look, I even asked for my Inspector General of Biosecurity to go through my department and make sure that we're efficient and doing and spending money appropriately. He came back with some recommendations, so much so that since the October budget last year and the May budget this year, the federal government's increased spending by over $1 billion. And we're looking at technology, so 3D X-ray scanners at ports to make sure that we can scan. But we're also putting money into what we're calling as exercises. We've been doing a lot of desktop exercises where we've simulated an incursion in Australia, and unfortunately we've fallen short with the states, and that's concerning. So we had over $16 million set aside so that we could do these simulations in real life, real person, to make sure that if there was a foot and mouth disease outbreak, that the states were prepared to work with it. And unfortunately, we can't see what they're spending on. And this is just about them living up to their responsibility. They said this was such a big issue that they wanted on the National Ag Ministers meeting agenda. I've done that, but I can't do any more until they're honest and transparent, not just with me, but I think with our individual farmers. And if they don't do that, then it's been more about politics than about outcomes.
And does that go down to really developing an evidence base for whether their programs actually work? That sort of transparency might feel good to make an announcement, but actually running them through the gauntlet of, well, is this actually achieving something on the ground?
Exactly, and that's not necessarily just about programs. It's also about technology, about how their technology integrates with ours to make sure that if something happens at the borders, we can call quickly on them and to say, look, there's been an incursion. We have to act swiftly together to make sure we can work through that. But it's also the programs in terms of eradication of pests that have been here for some time about whether they're actually effective. And in fact, we're all paying over $400 million in Queensland at the moment, even though you're from the southern states, to get rid of fire ants. And the Queensland government has failed to run that program. And in fact, they're spreading instead of being eradicated, despite that amount of money being told to us that would eradicate it. And so these are the types of things that if we don't know at a federal level what the states are doing, then it comes back to bite us all. And if that fire ant gets up into the headwaters of the Murray-Darling, I'm afraid to say that you'll see them in the southern states. And this is the sort of stuff that when the state ministers say that this is such a big issue, well, they need to follow through and be open and transparent with their farmers and everybody so we get this right.
Okay, Minister, what are some of the other biosecurity threats to us? I mean, we talk about the fire ants, but are we talking varroa mites? Are we talking for the southern states in Victoria and New South Wales? Any particular threats that you're seeing?
The biggest threat that we're finding at the moment is African swine fever and also foot and mouth disease. So over a 2-month period at our postal facilities, of the incursions we found, 24% had foot and mouth disease, and I think about 26 had ASF. So that's a huge incursion rate. So what we're doing is investing in 3D X-ray technology. So every one of the 144 million parcels now will go through a 3D X-ray that we've created here with artificial intelligence that will pull it out, and we'll have a sniffer dog go over it. We're the first country to trial with New Zealand, that when you put your bags on a carousel in New Zealand, it'll use that 3D X-ray, and we will know what's in your bag, and we will watch what you are declaring on your border pass as you come in. And if you don't declare, we will go towards you and we will pull it out. And if you have broken biosecurity rules, I've lifted the penalties from $400 to over $2,664, and we're actually cancelling visas. I've actually sent 14 people home who've come to this country, broken our biosecurity laws, and we have sent them on the plane they came in on because they didn't declare. So we're simply saying declare, but we're getting technology now that'll detect these types of things, and particularly when you think about foot and mouth disease, that could cost us over $50 billion. African swine fever could cost us over $2 billion in the first 12 months alone. So frightening statistics, and then when you think about some of these pests are in fact blowing in, you've got to understand some of them are sitting up in Southeast Asia, and we've had them actually the fall armyworm blew in from overseas. So some of them aren't necessarily just coming in through our ports; they're actually literally blowing in from Southeast Asia, and that's why we need the states to work with us to know what they're spending on, what programs they're spending on, so we can protect farmers and protect the environment.
The Minister for Agriculture, David Littleproud, talking about biosecurity here on the Flow Morning Show. We thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.